The UK dismisses Russia's claims the West is to blame for the Ukraine invasion as fairy tale. Vladimir Putin made the claim in his big speech at Russia's big annual military parade, but it was met with disbelief here.
Putin, his inner circle and his generals are now mirroring fascism and tyranny of 77 years ago.
Also this lunchtime, Morrisons saves McCalls, what it means for shops and jobs. Has your direct debit doubled for your energy bills? Ofgem to investigate. And Andy Warhol's multi-million Marilyn Monroe set to break records in New York tonight.
This is the ITV Lunchtime News with Nina Hussain.
Good afternoon. The UK's Defence Secretary has hit back at Vladimir Putin's claims that NATO is preparing to invade Russia. The Russian leader used a big military parade in Moscow today to tell his country that the invasion of Ukraine had been provoked by the West. Ben Wallace called the claims fairy tale and accused Russia of mirroring fascism. The annual parade in Moscow marks the anniversary of the Soviet Union's victory over Germany in the Second World War. But a big air display was cancelled at the last minute, and the president made no announcement of what his plans for Ukraine were, as some had predicted. Here's our correspondent, Geraint Vincent.
The reputation of Russia's military has been tarnished terribly by its war in Ukraine. And despite the evidence of incompetence and failure which has littered the roads back and forth to Kiev over the last 2 months, over the cobbles of Red Square this morning, the High Command rolled out their shiniest hardware in an attempt to inspire at least some awe. This parade is the annual commemoration of the Soviet Union's victory over Nazi Germany, and today's Commander-in-Chief took the opportunity to liken his invasion of Ukraine to the heroic struggles of the past. Our soldiers, said Mr. Putin, are defending the motherland, fighting for the future of Russia and making sure there is no place in the world for Nazis. That wasn't the only unfounded claim in his speech. He also suggested that NATO countries had been planning an attack on Russia from Ukraine.
Минута молчания. Ура!
There were rumours that the president might use the parade to make a major announcement, maybe a mass mobilisation, but there was none. And the planned flypast by the Air Force was cancelled, according to the Kremlin, because of weather conditions, although there appeared to be plenty of blue sky above today. From Kiev, Ukraine's President Zelensky posted his response on social media. Walking alone through his capital streets, he too recalled Ukraine's victory over the Nazis, but he said his countrymen and women were now fighting for their freedom once again. And as the generals lined up behind Putin in Moscow, from London there came withering criticism of their responsibility in an illegal war.
Through their invasion of Ukraine, Putin, his inner circle and his generals are now mirroring fascism and tyranny of 77 years ago, repeating the errors of the last century's totalitarian regimes. They are showing the same disregard for human lives, national sovereignty and the rules-based international system, the very system, not least the United Nations Charter itself, that we conceived together and for which we fought and were victorious together.
President Putin had hoped to celebrate another victory this morning over a Ukraine which has proved determined and resilient. A victory which continues to elude him. Geraint Vincent, ITV News.
We'll be live in Ukraine with our global security editor, Rohit Kachru, in just a moment. First to Moscow, where we can join our correspondent, Carl Din. And Carl, what can we read into what Putin said, or rather, what he didn't say today?
Well, it does seem to indicate a lack of new thinking on this in the Kremlin, although it must be said that there is rumoured to be a national security meeting happening here in Moscow today, so President Putin could yet surprise us with something. Although the lack of new ideas wasn't the only thing missing today, there was less hardware on display than in recent years. One of his most senior generals, the most senior general in fact, Valery Gerasimov, appeared to be missing from the parade. It's rumoured that he's been injured in Ukraine. So it was a slightly unusual kind of Victory Day parade here. What's happening at the moment is another part of the day's events called the Immortal Regiment, when Russians carry pictures, portraits of their relatives who fought in World War II, what they call the Great Patriotic War, through the streets in their memory. It is a very emotive, very important, culturally and politically important day here, which is why President Putin goes to such lengths to try and justify what he's doing in Ukraine by referring back to Russia's victories in World War II and the fight against fascism. Of course, in Ukraine, President Zelensky has rejected what President Putin said. He said that the Ukraine's victory was also part of World War II, and he would not allow that to be appropriated by Moscow.
Carl Dinnan, thank you very much. Let's join Rohit now in Kyiv. How will Putin's speech be received there in Ukraine?
Well, with a great deal of uncertainty, because this was a Victory Day speech without a victory and without any real news. It leaves a great deal of questions unanswered. Remember, the original Russian plan was that perhaps by the end of February, the start of March, these streets would be filled with Russian tanks, Russian soldiers. Of course, that's not the case, but what we seem to hear from Putin earlier was a resetting of the ambition, speaking only about Donbass, not actually ever mentioning Ukraine by name, and certainly not mentioning the ambition of a full invasion of the entire country. And there is one particular question which was unanswered, which was this issue of whether the Russians will have mass mobilization, a huge call-up of soldiers. What we know is around 80% of its battalion tactical groups have already been committed to this war. They don't have enough soldiers for a proper rotation, and so they will have to do something soon. And as for President Putin's speech this morning, he didn't really answer the question of what they might do next.
Rohit Khatri, thank you. Back here, thousands of jobs have been secured after Morrisons won the battle to buy McCalls out of administration. McCalls has 1,100 stores across the country with 16,000 workers across those stores. Around 6,000 of those are believed to be full-time. Our business editor Joel Hills is at a McCalls in West London. This lunchtime relief, I would imagine, for staff and management across the chain.
Relief and surprise. This is quite an odd outcome. A business that was not long for this world suddenly found itself in very high demand. McCalls is set to, I do apologise, McCalls is set to enter administration. It will re-emerge almost immediately as a wholly owned subsidiary of Morrisons, which has won its dust up with EG Group. Morrisons entered a bid last week, which was rejected on Friday. It got improved over the weekend. As part of it, the supermarket will take on all of McCall's shops, all its staff. Importantly, the two pension schemes, which have 2,000 members, EG Group wanted to offload that responsibility, of course. And Morrisons has agreed to settle all of McCall's debts in full immediately. So creditors ultimately were happy with this. We're expecting confirmation of the deal at some point this afternoon.
And what, if anything, will change, do you think?
Well, I think initially very little. Everything you can buy in McCall's currently is pretty much supplied with Morrisons anyway. It's been the main supplier there since 2017. Around 270 McCalls stalls are already branded Morrisons Daily, like this one in Chelmsford. Morrisons plans to roll out and rebrand around 450 of them. What happens to the rump isn't yet clear, but Morrisons has made this very strong undertaking to take them all on with the staff that come with them, of course. I think this is, you have to remember here that McCalls didn't have a future as an independent business. It was losing money, it was losing the confidence of its suppliers. Morrisons has rescued quite a lot.
Joel Hills, thank you. In the last half an hour, as expected, the DUP have confirmed they will not be nominating a deputy until their concerns about post-Brexit trading arrangements are addressed. Sinn Féin won the most seats, and it is the first time ever a nationalist party has been the largest at Stormont in terms of seats. This means it is entitled to the role of First Minister, and the DUP would hold the deputy position. The Northern Ireland Secretary is meeting with political parties to try to avert yet another crisis. The Labour leader, Sir Keir Starmer, refused to answer questions this morning about the investigation into accusations he broke lockdown rules in Durham. He also cancelled a speech for today where he would have faced journalists. Our political correspondent Daniel Hewitt is at Labour Party headquarters in London. Daniel, why is he keeping away from questions?
Well, Nina, it's probably because he's trying to work out what the answer would be. The central problem here for Sir Keir Starmer is that when Boris Johnson and the Chancellor Rishi Sunak were fined for breaching lockdown rules in Downing Street, he called for them to resign on a point of principle. So the obvious question, therefore, is if Keir Starmer is fined by Durham police, and he claims he did nothing wrong here, then will he resign? That is the question they'll be grappling here at Labour Party HQ. Keir Starmer was meant to be giving a speech this morning. He's cancelled it. His office statement due to a diary change. He really should be out here celebrating what was a pretty good set of local election results for Labour last week. Instead, he's grappling with potentially his future leadership of the party. Now, all of this, of course, relates back to April last year. So Keir Starmer was in Durham campaigning for the local election in 2021. He was seen having a beer. He ate a curry in an MP's office as part of that campaigning. Now, he's always claimed he was working. He stopped to eat, have a drink. He went back to work. His opponents say that was not allowed during the rules. It was socialising with too big a group over the weekend. An internal Labour memo was leaked to the Mail on Sunday, which showed this curry wasn't spontaneous, that it was part of a schedule to have dinner at that time. His opponents say it shows he broke the rules. His supporters say it shows it was a work event. Earlier we asked Wes Streeting, the Labour Shadow Minister, what he thought.
Keir Starmer practices what he preaches. He's kept within the rules at all times. What he was doing in Durham was perfectly permissible. He was out there campaigning an election, that was allowed. Stopped for a meal, that was allowed. Carried on working, that was allowed. What a contrast with what we saw in the heart of government in Number 10. And in the end, that's why I think Keir Starmer will be vindicated at the end of this police investigation.
Now, the big political gamble here for Keir Starmer, if he does come out and say he'll resign if he's fined, it does, yes, put the point of principle back onto Boris Johnson and to say you didn't resign when you were fined. Of course, it puts his whole political career on the whim of the police force in Durham.
Daniel Hewitt, thank you. Still to come, the airport queues causing missed flights and misery. And could this iconic picture break records? First, we all know energy bills are going up, but have you seen your direct debit double? The money-saving expert Martin Lewis says 30% of people who use British Gas, Octopus Energy and Shell have reported such a rise despite the price cap being half that. So what is going on? I'm joined now by Martin Lewis. Martin, what have the energy companies that we're talking about here said in response to what people have told your survey?
Well, there are lots of different replies from the energy companies. One, Octopus Energy originally said we were totally wrong and it was only 0.84% of people, before coming back later and saying actually it's 15% of people have seen their direct debits double. Now, I just need to bring this back for a second, because what we're not doing is just looking right across the board. There are legitimate reasons some people's direct debits sadly will have gone up by double. If you were on a cheap fix and it ended and moved to the price cap, If you were on the price cap and you moved to an expensive fix, or if you were in energy debt, all of those are legitimate reasons for it to double. So what we did is we did a self-selecting survey of 40,000 people responded, and then we got rid of everybody except those who've been on the price cap for at least 3 months and are in credit, in which case their rise should have only been around the rise in the price cap, which was 54%. But to give a bit of wriggle room, we'll say 45 to 65%. And from those respondents, and while I accept that more angry people would reply, so it skews somewhat, British Gas, Octopus and Shell all had 30% or more people seeing their direct debits double or more. But across the board, for all firms, it was 25%. And the average rise was far higher than the price cap has gone up. Now, that smells wrong to me. And we're putting it to the regulator, Ofgem, and the Department for Business and the Business Committee at Commons, the Commons, which I first raised this issue with about 6 weeks ago.
OK, so Ofgem says it will investigate your findings with all those caveats that you mentioned. What is your advice for people right now who are faced with such bills where their direct debits have doubled?
So if you're on the price cap and haven't moved off it and you're in credit, your energy bill should not be going up by more than double. So first of all, do a meter reading, and then politely, because call centre staff at energy firms are having a hard time and there's no need, it's not their fault, politely call them up and say, my direct debit's doubled, but my price has only gone up by 54%. I'm in credit. Please justify the increase. If they can't justify the increase, and I think it would be quite difficult to justify it in many occasions, then under energy firms' licence terms and conditions, you have a right to a fair direct debit. So request that they put your direct debit down. Look, it's going to go up by at least 50%, but if it's doubling, bring it back to a fair amount. If they refuse to do that, then make a formal complaint. If they refuse to honour it after a formal complaint, then take it to the Free Energy Ombudsman Service and ask for an adjudication. My concern is some companies, not necessarily the specific ones I've mentioned, but some companies are effectively gaining in their cash flow at the cost of customers. Of course, a higher direct debit doesn't mean you'll pay more in the long run. You'll get it back at some point. But in the midst of cost of living crisis, to have more money coming out of people's pockets when it shouldn't do hurts.
Martin, briefly, do you have to pay by direct debit? Can you cancel that and pay a different way right now?
You can, but it's more expensive. Quite simply, the price cap for somebody who was just paying on receipt of bills for a usage where it'd be £1,971 on monthly direct debit would be around £2,100 if you're paying in receipt of bills. So you would actually pay more by cancelling your direct debit in the long run, even though your cash flow may be better. And that's a catch-22 we don't want people to get in, which is why making sure people have a fair direct debit is the right thing to do. And we're formally putting this to the regulator to deal with. OK, clear advice there. If you're on a direct debit, you think you're paying too much, investigate it, fight it. Martin Lewis, thank you very much for your help and advice. Thank you. Now, it's been a miserable start to many happy holidays because of long queues at Manchester Airport. Some passengers who had hoped to fly away are instead still at home after missing flights because of the queues. Our North of England reporter Yasmin Bodleby is there. Many frustrated and I would imagine angry passengers as well.
Absolutely. We've been hearing some real horror stories from passengers today who've been inside the terminal. People describing the situation as manic, absolute chaos and a shambles. We've been hearing about people reduced to tears as they realise they're about to miss their flights, even some people fainting in huge security queues. What's going wrong? Well, the industry has real problems recruiting enough staff to cope. People are starting to travel again after the world is starting to open up again after the pandemic. But many people in the industry left during the pandemic and now it's really struggling to scale back up in time. Just a few minutes ago, I caught up with a couple, Stephanie and Carl. They booked themselves onto a short break to Poland. They arrived here with 3.5 hours to give themselves time to get through the airport. It wasn't enough. They said it was absolutely manic. She said she was sick 3 times as she realised she was about to miss her flight.
Everyone was just panicking, weren't they? People was asking the people who work there about the flats, and they just kept saying stay in the queue. People panicked. A girl passed out, didn't she, on the floor? It was just, everyone was just crammed in.
We should say it's not just Manchester that's affected by these problems.
No, absolutely. We've heard of problems reported today at Birmingham Airport as well as this morning. People say that they've been stuck in queues for hours. Now, Birmingham Airport says that half of its 15,000 customers today were booked on flights that were all in the morning peak rush hour. So that's why we saw those huge queues there. Manchester Airport says that this is something that is affecting the whole industry, and they say that they're actually doing quite well with their recruitment drive. They've got hundreds of people now back inside those terminals working. That, though, will be little comfort to people who missed their flights this morning.
Indeed. Jasmine Bottleby, thank you very much. Thank you. Finally, this lunchtime, it's one of the most famous portraits in the world of one of the most famous women. Andy Warhol shot sage blue Marilyn, depicting a pop art interpretation of Marilyn Monroe, will be auctioned in New York tonight. It could become the 20th century's most expensive work of art. Sally Biddulph on the picture and its high price.
Vibrant and iconic, Andy Warhol's shot sage blue Marilyn is seared into the fabric of modern culture. And tonight it goes under the hammer at Christie's in New York with an estimate of $200 million.
This work is poised to be the most expensive painting of the 20th century ever sold at auction. The beauty, also the tragedy that comes with it, it's all part of it. And it's all in her, and we all feel it.
And all the proceeds will go to charity. Marilyn is just one piece in the auction of the art collection of siblings Doris and Thomas Arman, Swiss art dealers turned philanthropists. Doris's dying wish that the money be used to care for poor children. Thomas spotted Warhol's genius early on, and the two became good friends, here pictured on the artist's right.
Thomas was the greatest admirer of Andy Warhol. He admired him as a human being, as an artist. He always said, Andy Warhol will never die. His art is so important for generations, and you see what's happening now.
Warhol's pop art has punctuated modern life since the 60s, and tonight Marilyn could punch a hole in the record books. The idea is not to live forever, Warhol said. It is to create something that will. Sally Biddulph, ITV News.
That's it this lunchtime. Charlene's here with the evening news at 6:30 from everyone on today's Lunchtime team. Bye-bye.